The galaxy was on edge. The Orcs Empire, a race known for their cruelty and brutal efficiency, had long ruled over countless worlds. Their warships were the terror of the stars, and they left no survivors in their wake. Entire civilizations had fallen before their might, and resistance seemed impossible. But now, something unusual was happening. A new ship had entered Orcs-controlled space, a ship the likes of which no one had ever seen. Early reports identified it as human-made, but that didn't make sense. Humanity was still a young species, stuck on their small planet, far from being a threat to the galaxy's powerful empires. No one had expected them to have developed any kind of advanced technology, let alone a ship that could dare approach the Orcs domain. Whispers spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Could it be a trap? Some sort of elaborate ruse? Or, more troubling, was humanity far more advanced than anyone had realized? The Orcs leaders wasted no time. Their war machines roared into action as they scrambled to assess this mysterious vessel. This was no ordinary ship, that much was clear. The human-made vessel, the Sovereign Dawn, was sleek and unlike anything the Orcs had ever encountered. Its design was a strange blend of old-world craftsmanship mixed with technology that was far beyond anything humanity should have been capable of. Its smooth surface seemed to deflect the Orcs sensors, making it almost impossible to fully understand its capabilities. The Orcs fleet launched probes and scanned with every method at their disposal, but they couldn't get a clear reading on the ship's weapons or speed. The Sovereign Dawn seemed to defy all logic, appearing to be both ancient and futuristic at the same time. As the days passed, the Orcs military grew more anxious. They had dealt with rebellious species, fought countless wars, and crushed empires with ease. But this human ship, it was different. They couldn't help but feel something unsettling in the air, a growing sense of uncertainty. For the first time, the Orcs were not facing an opponent they could crush with sheer force. They were facing an unknown, a challenge unlike any they had ever faced before. In their arrogance, they had never even considered humanity to be a threat. And yet, here they were, staring down a mysterious ship that seemed to hold secrets that could threaten the Empire's entire way of life. The human ship, though small, in comparison to the Orcs battlecruisers, was acting strangely calm. While the Orcs were ready to strike, the Sovereign Dawn remained unmoving, hovering at the edge of their space. There was no sign of panic, no sign of retreat. The humans were doing something unexpected. They were waiting. The Orcs commanders debated whether to send a fleet to destroy the ship immediately or to attempt to communicate. For once, the Orcs Empire was at a loss. Their entire military might was not enough to read or understand the humans, and this uncertainty gnawed at them. What were the humans planning? Was this some kind of psychological warfare, a tactic to make the Orcs doubt their own power? Or was there something more? The tension in the galaxy thickened. The news spread like wildfire, and the galaxy watched, in horror and fascination. Could the human race have something up their sleeves that no one had expected? Were they really capable of confronting an empire as mighty as the Orcs? Or was this a brief flicker, a false spark before the inevitable collapse of a species that was far out of its depth? As the Sovereign Dawn remained in place, seemingly waiting for the Orcs to make a move, the galaxy waited too. And for the first time, the Orcs Empire was not certain of the outcome. They had met resistance before, but this was something new, something that made even their most hardened generals hesitate. The Orcs were used to dominating, to instilling fear and subjugation. But now, they weren't sure whether they were facing an enemy, or something far more dangerous, a species that refused to be dominated, a species that was already challenging their entire worldview. The Orcs Empire, though shocked by the presence of the human ship, could not afford to show weakness. When the message arrived, clear and simple, "Do not fear, we come in peace." It was met with disbelief. The Othrecs had ruled the galaxy for centuries, their might unrivaled. Peaceful intentions, from a species they had long considered beneath them, seemed impossible. The message was dismissed as a trick, a deception designed to lure them into a false sense of security. They expected humans to ask for something, to demand resources or territory, or perhaps to manipulate the Othrecs with promises of technology. Instead, the humans' message was different. They offered something unexpected: knowledge. The humans wanted nothing but peace and the chance to share their scientific discoveries. No demands, no threats. They spoke of a future where both civilizations could thrive side by side, exchanging their unique advancements for mutual benefit. This seemed almost too good to be true. The Othrecs, who had seen countless species bow to their rule, had no interest in an alliance based on equality. They saw an opportunity, not to negotiate but to manipulate. The Othrecs saw themselves as the superior race, and any offer of peace had to be a ploy to weaken them. If humanity was indeed as advanced as it seemed, they might have something worth taking. But the Othrecs were underestimating humanity's resolve. The humans, aboard their mysterious ship, were calm and collected, their actions deliberate, their words carrying an air of quiet confidence. The Othrecs commanders decided to test the humans, to see if they truly had the courage they claimed to possess. One of their highest-ranking generals, a man named Varen, was tasked with disrupting the humans' communication systems, hoping to break their resolve. His mission was simple: disable the Sovereign Dawn's array and force the humans to make a mistake. Once communication was severed, the Othrecs could force the humans into submission without resistance. But the humans were prepared. Varen's attempt to sabotage the ship's communications went unnoticed, until, in an instant, half of the Othrecs' fleet's communication systems suddenly went dark. No alarms, no warning, just complete silence. The Othrecs scrambled to re-establish contact with their fleet, but their efforts were futile. For the humans, it had been a surgical strike, a precise, methodical response to a threat that left the Othrecs' commanders reeling. In one swift move, the human ship had not only neutralized their offensive, but it had also shown something that shook the Othrecs to their core: control. The humans hadn't fired a single shot, yet they had crippled the Othrecs' fleet. The operation was flawless, executed with a precision that left the Othrecs stunned. It wasn't brute force that defeated them. It was calm, controlled intelligence. And in that moment, the Othrecs realized something important. They had always relied on overwhelming strength, on fear, on intimidation. But the humans were different. The humans were not afraid. They were not eager for war, but neither were they cowed into submission. They were disciplined, strategic, and above all, united. The Othrecs leaders were now faced with a terrible truth. The humans, despite being seemingly outmatched, had shown them a new kind of power, a power that came not from the size of their fleet or the strength of their weapons, but from their unwavering resolve. They had no intention of bending to Othrecs' demands, and they had the skill to back up their words. This was not the type of enemy that could be crushed with a few blows. This was the type of enemy that would rise after every fall, adapt after every failure, and fight with a determination that would never fade. The Othrecs, seeing their arrogance start to crumble, understood they were facing something they could not easily defeat. Humanity had made their point. They were not here to beg for peace. They were here to negotiate on equal terms. And now, the Othrecs had to decide whether to engage in diplomacy or to risk an even greater conflict with a species they had never fully understood. The Sovereign Dawn floated in silence, its crew awaiting the Othrecs' response, calm and ready for whatever came next. The galaxy watched with bated breath, uncertain of how this unexpected confrontation would unfold. Would the Othrecs' empire crumble before the resolve of humanity, or would they try to crush the human threat once and for all? Either way, the game had changed, and the Othrex would never be the same again. The Othrex Empire had always prided itself on its technological superiority and military might. No other species in the galaxy had ever posed a real threat to them. Yet, as they scrambled to understand how the humans had managed to strike back so effectively, something troubling began to emerge. Despite all their advanced weaponry and intelligence, the Othrex were coming to an uncomfortable conclusion. The humans were not just resilient, they were unnaturally so. The Sovereign Dawn, a ship that should have been far outmatched by the Othrex war fleets, had crippled half of their communication systems with a precision that defied their understanding. This wasn't just about advanced technology. The humans had something deeper, something that made them far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The more the Othrex studied humanity, the more they began to uncover a chilling truth. The human race had survived against all odds, facing disasters that would have wiped out any other species. Their history was marked by environmental collapse, global conflicts, pandemics, and countless obstacles that would have crippled other civilizations. Yet time and time again, humanity had risen from the ashes, stronger and more determined. This resilience was not just something the humans possessed, it was built into their very nature. As the humans began to share more about their technological advancements, the Othrex learned something that shook them to their core. The humans had mastered the use of artificial intelligence, creating machines that could learn, adapt, and evolve on their own. Their nanotechnology allowed them to repair and regenerate structures on the molecular level, making their ships and equipment nearly indestructible. Their most astounding discovery, however, was the development of self-healing ships, vessels that could repair themselves in the middle of battle. The Othrex, with all their power, had never encountered anything like this. For the first time, they realized that it wasn't just the technology that made humans formidable, it was the spirit behind the technology. Humans didn't create weapons of mass destruction to dominate others. Instead, they built tools to ensure their survival, their growth, and their ability to adapt, no matter the odds. As the Othrex leaders discussed the situation, they started to see the true nature of the human threat. It wasn't that humanity was technologically advanced, though their progress was remarkable. It was that humans were impossible to break. Where other species would have been crushed by the weight of their past failures, humanity simply moved forward, learning from each setback. It was this ability to learn, to evolve, and to grow stronger with every challenge that made them so dangerous. The Othrex began to understand why no matter how hard they pushed, no matter how much they tried to break humanity's spirit, the humans always came back. The Othrex had seen countless species fall before their might, and they had expected the same from humanity. Yet humans were different. They didn't bend to fear. Instead, they used it as a tool to sharpen their resolve. The Othrex had tried to intimidate, to weaken them with displays of power, but every time humanity faced adversity, they rose stronger. The human race was a paradox to the Othrex, small and young compared to their own ancient empire, yet with a depth of strength that seemed to defy logic. The humans were a race that could not be defeated. They could be delayed, held back, but never erased. The more the Othrex thought about it, the more they understood that the Sovereign Dawn itself was not the greatest weapon the humans possessed. The true weapon was humanity's unity. While other species in the galaxy were fragmented by greed, fear, and selfishness, humanity had always found ways to come together in the face of destruction. In moments of crisis, they had always united, bringing their collective strength to bear against any obstacle. No matter how severe the odds, the human race never lost hope, never gave in to despair. The Othrex could never replicate that spirit. They could never understand it. As the Othrex realized the full extent of humanity's strength, a sense of dread began to settle over their leaders. They had underestimated the humans, believing them to be weak, primitive. But now they saw the eye. Truth. Humanity wasn't just another species to be conquered. They were a force of nature, a force that, once unleashed, could change the very balance of the galaxy. And the Orcs, for the first time in their long history, were faced with a challenge they couldn't simply crush with force. They were facing something far more dangerous, a species that would never surrender, never break. The Orcs could not stop humanity. All they could do was watch as they began to rise, stronger than ever before. The Orcs Empire had waited long enough. Despite their initial confusion and fear of humanity's unexpected strength, they believed it was time to take control. They would not let this primitive species threaten the galaxy's balance. The Orcs decided on a covert mission to board the Sovereign Dawn and seize its advanced technology. Their plan was simple: send in a specialized unit of their most elite soldiers to infiltrate the human ship, disable its defenses, and steal whatever secrets the humans were hiding. If they could capture the ship's advanced systems, the Orcs would crush humanity's hope of ever becoming a true threat. But the Orc soldiers, trained in the arts of sabotage and stealth, vastly underestimated the humans. As they quietly infiltrated the Sovereign Dawn, expecting to find an unprepared, vulnerable crew, they were immediately met with resistance. The human crew, though not a military force by traditional standards, had been trained for moments exactly like this. Every single member of the crew, from the lowest-ranking officer to the captain, was skilled in close combat, advanced tactics, and survival under pressure. The humans were not the unorganized, fearful species the Orcs had imagined. As the alien infiltrators moved deeper into the ship, they soon realized they were walking straight into a carefully planned trap. The humans had anticipated every move, and the Orcs were walking directly into their snare. What followed was a brutal, efficient counterattack. The Orc soldiers, trained to fight with strength and precision, found themselves overwhelmed by a force that was just as precise but far more relentless. The human crew, moving in perfect coordination, picked off the invaders one by one, using tactics the Orcs had never seen before. No shots were fired, no blasters used, just quiet, calculated hand-to-hand combat that left the Orc soldiers disoriented and confused. The humans didn't just defend their ship, they seemed to own it, their knowledge of the vessel's every inch allowing them to strike with a precision that left the Orcs no chance. It was a perfect example of human adaptability, an enemy that could outthink and outmaneuver their attackers without ever needing to rely on sheer power. Back on the Orcs command station, the leaders watched in disbelief. Their elite unit had been decimated, the humans revealing yet another layer of their strength. The Orcs had never anticipated a species so unpredictable. This wasn't just a race of survivors. This was a race that had been preparing for this very moment, preparing for the arrival of a power they could not foresee. The Orcs leaders began to question everything they had once believed about humanity. Meanwhile, the supreme leader of the Orcs Empire, once confident that the human message of peace had been a mere facade, started to doubt everything. The humans had not made their move for domination. They had made it for something far more dangerous. It wasn't about war or conquest. It was about something that struck fear into the heart of the Orcs Empire, humanity's unwavering desire to become a force in the galaxy. The humans, despite their seeming weakness, had shown an unparalleled determination to rise. Their actions spoke of an ambition far beyond simple survival. They had no interest in negotiating a subordinate role. Their goal was far more powerful, to stand alongside the galaxy's mightiest empires, not as subjugated subjects, but as equals, with their own influence, their own place at the table. This realization hit the Orcs leaders with full force. They had thought humanity was weak, primitive, and unworthy of attention. But the truth was becoming clear. They could not defeat humanity, not through conventional warfare, not through terror, not through intimidation. Humanity was a threat, not because they sought war, but because they simply could not be defeated. Their resilience, their determination, and their growing strength had reached a point where no amount of force would ever be enough to crush them. The Othrecs had always believed that fear was the tool they could use to control the galaxy. But now, for the first time, they were the ones who feared. Humanity had proven to them that they could never truly be subjugated. The Othrecs leaders knew they had underestimated the humans. They were no longer just an annoyance. They were a rising power that could not be ignored, a force that had the potential to rewrite the galaxy's future. As the Othrecs scrambled to formulate a new strategy, one thing was clear. The game had changed. Humanity was no longer a species to be crushed. They were a species to be reckoned with. And the Othrecs Empire, for the first time in its long history, was now facing an enemy who would never back down. The time had come for the final confrontation, but it was not one of armies colliding on the battlefield. No, this battle would be one of willpower. The Othrecs Empire, once unchallenged in its supremacy, now found itself at a crossroads, facing a force unlike anything it had ever encountered. Humanity had made its intentions clear. They were not interested in domination, nor in a fight for territory. What they sought was something far more profound, a partnership. They were not asking for subjugation or surrender. They were offering an alliance, a chance to work together with the other species of the galaxy for a common future. The message was direct. Join us, or risk being left behind. Humanity had already made its choice, and now the Othrecs and every other species had to make theirs. The question was simple. Would the galaxy stand with humanity or against them? The Othrecs, still reeling from the realization that they could never truly defeat the humans, hesitated. They had expected humanity to fall into submission, to beg for peace on their terms. Instead, the humans stood strong, offering their hand, not as conquerors, but as equals. The Othrecs leaders knew that if they refused, the consequences would be dire. They had seen humanity's rise from the shadows of their primitive beginnings to a technological and military powerhouse. They had witnessed humans outsmart and outlast their attacks, showing an unstoppable resolve. To deny humanity now would mean isolating themselves from the galaxy's future, but to accept them would mean acknowledging that the balance of power had shifted in ways they could not control. As the Othrecs deliberated, the universe watched with bated breath. In the dark corners of space, where the Othrecs had once thought they held complete dominion, human fleets silently emerged from hidden sectors. The ships, sleek and powerful, carried not only new technologies far beyond what the Othrecs had ever imagined, but also the support of numerous smaller civilizations who had already pledged allegiance to humanity's cause. These were species who had once cowered under Othrecs' rule, but now stood tall beside the humans, united in their belief that the future lay in cooperation, not domination. The human fleets were not just ships. They were symbols of a growing alliance that spanned across the galaxy, and their presence sent a clear message. Humanity was no longer a race to be underestimated. The Othrecs found themselves facing an impossible decision. The war they had anticipated would not come in the form of a single, decisive battle. It would be an ongoing struggle against a force that could not be stopped. The humans were not just a new enemy. They were a force of nature, an unstoppable tide that would reshape the galaxy whether the Othrecs liked it or not. To continue to fight would mean endless conflict against an adversary that adapted with each encounter, learning from every misstep. There was no way to win, no way to break the will of humanity. And yet, the Othrecs could not bring themselves to submit without a fight. Pride, arrogance, and fear of being eclipsed by this young species held them back from fully embracing the possibility of an alliance. With their backs against the wall, the Othrecs leaders found themselves at a crossroads. They could not fight. humanity and win, not now. The galaxy's balance had already shifted, and no one, not even the mighty Orcs, could deny it. To continue the struggle would be to waste resources, to fight an enemy that would only grow stronger, more connected, and more determined with each passing day. The Orcs were faced with a choice. They could accept humanity's offer, recognizing that this young species had the power to reshape the future, or they could continue to resist, knowing it would only delay the inevitable. Across the stars, the galaxy held its breath. Some species, once hesitant, now saw the truth in humanity's words. The humans had proven themselves capable of so much more than they had ever been given credit for. They were not conquerors, they were builders, and their future would be one of collaboration, not conflict. The final choice, however, lay with the Orcs, and the fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. The Orcs Empire, despite its vast power, was beginning to understand the scale of the shift. The galaxy had moved on, and humanity had not just survived, it had thrived. Whether the Orcs would join this new age of cooperation or continue to fight against the tide would determine their place in the stars. One thing was certain: humanity had already carved out its place in the galaxy, and the future was no longer theirs alone to shape. The Orcs had one choice left: accept this new order or risk fading into obscurity, outmatched by the force of a species they had long underestimated.